What makes this even more unsettling is that the torture was not created by chaotic cruelty, but by the same administrative system that once brought order and prosperity to the kingdom. A system that slowly turned against its own people as its reach expanded. How did a ruler known for discipline and structure allow such a method to become part of his government? What pressures pushed a stable kingdom toward measures that reshaped its identity? And how did this punishment influence the downfall that no one at the time could predict? This is the documented story behind the Ash-Coal Shroud and the king who believed that absolute order required absolute control. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss more chilling tales from history's darkest corners. King Aderric of Rhyvenhold was born into a regional dynasty that had struggled for stability over 3 generations. His early life was marked by structured training in administration and military discipline. These foundations shaped his later approach to governance. He entered court politics at a time when territorial borders were frequently contested by neighboring lords. His ability to negotiate alliances without conceding key lands earned him early recognition among regional councils. This reputation positioned him as a practical and dependable candidate for eventual leadership. Before he came to the throne, Aderric served in an advisory role to his father, who valued structured governance. Aderric's attention to logistical planning and tax regulation proved instrumental during periods of resource shortages. His calculated responses to these challenges increased his influence within the royal bureaucracy. Following his father's passing, Aderric ascended with broad support from military officers and administrative officials. His coronation was noted for its emphasis on continuity rather than spectacle. The transition solidified his identity as a ruler who prioritized system stability over ceremonial display. Aderric's early reign focused on reorganizing provincial oversight. He delegated specific responsibilities to appointed magistrates trained in finance, agriculture, and infrastructure. This distributed model reduced administrative inefficiencies that had accumulated over decades. His methodical approach expanded the kingdom's ability to manage grain reserves and maintain structured supply lines. This system became especially important during seasonal crop shortages. Consistent record-keeping allowed the state to identify failing regions and redirect support accordingly. Aderric also emphasized the codification of local laws. He initiated a long project to unify regional statutes into a standardized legal framework. This effort reduced disputes between provincial courts and increased procedural predictability. Military organization remained another central focus of his rule. Aderric restructured the army's command hierarchy by introducing defined ranks and standardized training routines. These reforms produced more reliable troop performance during border patrols. He invested in the construction of fortified outposts along the northern range. These outposts functioned as watch stations and supply depots. Their placement created a more efficient network for monitoring unauthorized crossings. Aderric's foreign policies aimed at limiting conflicts while reinforcing territorial integrity. He opened treaties with trade cities to the west, allowing for regulated movement of merchants through controlled gates. These agreements strengthened revenue streams without compromising border authority. Relations with the southern highland communities required a different strategy. Aderric focused on structured tribute arrangements that allowed the Highlanders autonomy in internal matters. This approach maintained long-term stability and avoided costly military campaigns. Despite his preference for order, Aderric maintained firm positions on internal dissent. He supported rapid investigations during incidents of tax resistance or unlawful assembly. His administrative staff documented these events thoroughly to ensure procedural consistency. Aderric's interest in knowledge preservation led to the expansion of the royal archives. He commissioned the copying of agricultural manuals, travel logs, and diplomatic records. These collections helped train future officials and improved state continuity. He also encouraged the study of engineering principles. Royal craftsmen were instructed to document methods for bridge construction and irrigation design. Their work allowed the kingdom to improve water distribution and extend arable land. Public works became a symbol of his reign's structural focus. Roads were reinforced with more stable materials, and new way stations were added to long trade routes. These upgrades increased the movement efficiency of goods and military units. Aderric maintained close communication with council representatives from rural districts. He reviewed reports about livestock health, soil exhaustion, and market prices. This oversight allowed him to make informed decisions about resource allocation. His governance style relied on gradual adjustments rather than rapid reforms. He preferred policies that could be supported by clear records and established precedents. This method reduced internal disputes within the bureaucracy. Religious institutions also played a role in his administration. Aderric granted them defined boundaries regarding land ownership and tax obligations. Their predictable legal status prevented jurisdictional conflicts between clerical leaders and state officials. Aderic's personal life remained largely separate from his political responsibilities. He adopted a routine structured around regular council meetings, military reviews, and archival briefings. Observers noted his reliance on dependable patterns rather than spontaneous decision-making. Trade expansion continued as a priority throughout the middle years of his reign. He introduced standardized weights and measures for merchants operating in major markets. This reduced disputes that had previously slowed commercial activity. His emphasis on border planning grew more pronounced after several minor incursions along the eastern frontier. He responded by assigning experienced commanders to oversee patrol rotations and supply tracking. These measures ensured that the frontier remained manageable without escalating into broader conflict. Aderic's reign became associated with administrative consistency. Many officials trained under his system went on to support the state structure for decades. Their experience helped preserve institutional knowledge even during periods of political strain. The king continued to refine governance procedures over time. His methods emphasized documentation, accountability, and controlled delegation. These practices shaped the identity of the Rhyvenhold government throughout his rule. As the administrative system grew more rigid, tensions slowly formed among groups who opposed the centralization of authority. These disputes did not yet threaten the stability of the throne, but revealed growing dissatisfaction. These underlying pressures would later shape the developments of the next period. His reign remained defined by structure and order rather than public display. The kingdom under his leadership operated with consistent routines supported by detailed record-keeping. This framework created both durability and limitations for future governance. During the later years of King Aderric's reign, administrative order remained the core of his governance, yet his approach to internal enforcement became increasingly assertive. The centralized structures he had established required mechanisms that ensured compliance. As regional tensions grew, his advisors recommended new procedural methods for handling persistent dissent. Aderric responded by authorizing expanded investigative councils. These councils were responsible for documenting violations, verifying testimony, and presenting formal reports. Their structured approach created clarity but also increased the reach of state oversight into local affairs. Punitive measures during this period were intended to reinforce administrative expectations. The king believed that predictable consequences strengthened the stability of the realm. As new procedures developed, the state began cataloging specific punishments for documented offenses. The Ash-Coal Shroud emerged within this catalog as a specialized method for dealing with individuals accused of repeated violations or resistance to mandated directives. It was designed to impose controlled heat exposure without immediate fatality. The procedure aligned with the king's preference for methods that produced compliance rather than sudden termination. The method involved a mixture of warm ash blended with small heated coals. The materials were distributed from state facilities tasked with preparing standardized mixtures for official use. Their temperature was carefully regulated to ensure uniform application. This punishment targeted the back of the individual, which was considered a practical surface for consistent coverage. Officials believed that the steady heat weakened the will of resistant subjects while allowing them to survive the process. Surviving subjects could then be redirected into monitored labor, which the state viewed as a productive outcome. Aderric's councils documented the procedure in administrative manuals. These manuals outlined the required temperature range, preparation steps, and supervision protocols. The system aimed to minimize irregularities and prevent unauthorized intensification by local enforcers. The Ash-Coal Shroud was not used broadly across the population. It was reserved for cases categorized as persistent obstruction. The state's records noted that its use was determined after multiple hearings or after failure to comply with corrective orders. The punishment was carried out in designated enforcement chambers. These chambers were typically attached to administrative compounds rather than military forts. Their design emphasized containment and procedural oversight rather than public display. Officials overseeing the procedure received formal training. They were instructed to maintain measured application and record the subject's condition throughout the process. These records were filed alongside the individual's legal case for future reference. Aderric justified the existence of such measures through the concept of structural necessity. He believed that an efficient state required predictable enforcement to maintain order. His writings and council briefs mention the idea of calibrated pressure as an alternative to widespread executions. The Ash-Coal Shroud also served as a symbolic representation of the king's governing philosophy. It demonstrated that the state had the ability to enforce its regulations through organized means. It communicated that resistance would be met with measured yet firm corrective action. Regional leaders submitted periodic reports on the method's effectiveness. These reports focused on compliance rates, labor output from rehabilitated subjects, and community reactions. Aderric reviewed the documents to assess whether the method aligned with broader administrative goals. Most reports suggested that the procedure produced high levels of compliance from individuals previously resistant to taxation or infrastructural obligations. Labor records indicated increased participation in road maintenance, granary organization, and canal reinforcement. These outcomes supported the continuation of the method within state policy. However, the presence of such a punishment also created apprehension among communities already uneasy with the expanding reach of central authority. While the method was not administered publicly, its existence circulated through local discussions. This awareness contributed to an atmosphere of cautious obedience. Aderric's advisors debated whether the method should be expanded to other regions. Some argued that uniform implementation would reinforce consistency across the realm. Others suggested that selective application preserved the method's authority without increasing resentment. The king retained ultimate decision-making authority and approved only limited expansion. He preferred incremental testing over rapid adoption. This careful approach reflected the same administrative mindset that marked his earlier reforms. Within the enforcement chambers, the procedure followed a standardized sequence. The ash mixture was prepared immediately before application to maintain optimal temperature. Officials then recorded the subject's identification, legal classification, and the ruling that justified the punishment. The individual was positioned in a manner that allowed clear access to the back while preventing excessive movement. This ensured that the mixture could be applied evenly and without interruption. After the procedure, officials documented the subject's physical condition and monitored their recovery. Subjects who completed the procedure without medical complications were typically reassigned to supervised labor or community service. Their progress was evaluated by appointed magistrates, who assessed whether their conduct met the standards required for release. This review process ensured that punitive measures were integrated with rehabilitative objectives. The Ash-Coal Shroud gained particular relevance during a series of administrative disputes in the eastern provinces. Several local officials had resisted new tax categorization protocols. When negotiations failed, the councils recommended calibrated enforcement to reassert control. Aderric approved selective use of the method in these regions. The application restored compliance among resistant officials and re-established the expected revenue streams. This outcome reinforced the king's confidence in the method's usefulness within the administrative system. Over time, internal documentation shows that the method became part of a broader framework of structured punishment. It existed alongside fines, property assessments, and labor assignments. The Ash-Coal Shroud represented the tier reserved for individuals who had exhausted administrative leniency. The method's implementation reflected Aderric's preference for predictable governance. He believed that clarity in both reward and consequence reduced uncertainty among officials and subjects. This belief shaped not only his legal reforms, but also his approach to disciplinary measures. Despite its restricted use, the Ash-Coal Shroud gained an identity within the bureaucratic culture of Rhyvenhold. Administrators viewed it as a tool of last resort for maintaining procedural stability. It represented the point where administrative patience ended and corrective enforcement began. Aderric's attention to detailed records created a comprehensive archive of the method's application. These documents included temperature logs, case notes, and magistrate evaluations. Later historians used these materials to study the evolution of punitive practices in the kingdom. The structure surrounding the Ash-Coal Shroud reflected the broader priorities of the reign. It demonstrated the king's commitment to administrative order, regulated enforcement, and procedural documentation. It aligned with his belief that authority must be supported by clear operational systems. As the kingdom continued to expand its administrative reach, the pressures generated by centralization began to accumulate. Regional leaders expressed growing concerns about the balance between governance and local autonomy. These concerns signaled emerging tensions that would influence the next phase of the king's rule. Events in the following period would reveal how these tensions developed and how the punitive systems, including the Ash-Coal Shroud, shaped the direction of the kingdom. The structures built under Aderric's authority would play a central role in the challenges ahead. As the administrative network expanded, regional officials began to question the degree of authority exercised by the central councils. Their reports indicated that some communities viewed the regulatory system as excessive. These concerns reflected a growing disconnect between local expectations and the capital's procedures. Aderric continued to rely on established administrative manuals, but the rigidity of the system left little room for negotiation. Provincial leaders found themselves bound by requirements that did not always match local conditions. The resulting disputes slowed the implementation of new projects in several districts. The presence of punitive measures, including the Ash-Coal Shroud, contributed to cautious compliance, but also heightened anxiety among officials. Some magistrates believed that corrective enforcement overshadowed cooperative governance. Their reservations gradually influenced regional attitudes toward royal authority. Communication delays further strained relations. Reports from distant provinces often arrived after conditions had shifted, creating mismatches between directives and current circumstances. This reduced the effectiveness of the structured approach that had defined Aderric's earlier success. As tensions increased, regional councils began advocating for expanded decision-making autonomy. They argued that localized judgment produced more practical outcomes than strict adherence to central procedures. These requests signaled a shift in the administrative balance of the kingdom. Aderric maintained confidence in the established system, but faced diminishing support from officials who once promoted its efficiency. The central bureaucracy struggled to adjust to changing expectations, revealing structural limitations that had remained hidden during more stable years. The gradual erosion of administrative cohesion weakened the consistency that had characterized the reign. Regional leaders adopted varied interpretations of royal directives, further reducing unified governance. This fragmentation marked the beginning of a period in which the authority of the crown became increasingly difficult to enforce.